to the cloud. Thank you. Okay. Here we go. And liftoff. I'm here today with MJ. Hi. And MJ is a writer, and we met in a dance event, and she calls herself an amateur dancer, which one day will be an expert dancer, I believe. And she's got a master's in rhetoric and creative writing. And she has many interesting perspectives and thoughts on gender and gendering in society and how it informs and interacts with our lives. And so do I. So I thought we should have a chat and share our fascinating conversation with the world. And MJ, you had an idea, some great ideas where we should start, and we agreed on safety.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Would you like to elaborate on what that means?
Yes. Well, that's what I've been trying to figure out. So I've been studying masculinity as a layman for a while. It's fascinating to me. Obviously, how we define it and how it shows up in a culture really, really varies. It's probably a hot topic for people to get angry. But I really am interested in how men and women define safety differently, because I think that's getting in the way of some of our conversations and some of our ability to repair and actually like move in a world where we can both genders, or however we're speaking of this, can heal and repair and move towards each other, and have better, safer relationships. So safety, I've really seen a lot of men define safety as a very physical thing, right? If someone says, I'll keep you safe, kind of like the old fashioned like chivalry, like I'm gonna protect you, I'll take a bullet for you. I haven't seen that. Like, it's not really as much of a cultural phenomenon as it was maybe 20 years ago. There's kind of like Southern tropes about like, we're gonna, like in the South, like I think men in the South maybe have that kind of gallantry, but it's not something I've seen talked about quite as much. But when we're talking about it, safety is often physical for men. And so a little bit of context of my history. I grew up in a really strict religious household and church family. It was very bordering on fundamentalist. It's kind of like, it wasn't overtly fundamentalist, but it had a lot of fundamentalist ideas. So my perceived sense of safety as a child was, all these men are here to keep you safe. They exist to keep you safe. You're here to be saved by them, right? And then as I got older, I kind of realized not only was I not being kept safe by them, but they were usually the ones hurting me the most. And they did this by demanding that I be powerless around them, demanding that there were authority structures where they were in charge and I was deferent, me or other women, there are lots of structures, power structures like that. But for me, as a woman, that's where that existed for me. And so it made for a really interesting exploration as I backed out of that, because safety became very differently defined for me, right? You could have a man look at me in the eye saying, I will keep you safe. And I'd be like, you are effing lying to me, because that's not what safety is, right? You can say, you can keep me out of harm's way, but how come this, and this happened to me? So it's been something I've explored in that regard, as I've kind of like gone through the like anger stages and like, how could this have happened stages, I felt so safe growing up, and then realizing like, oh, I'm really just like, I've been powerless and stripped of my agency. But as I have kind of come back into some of my power, started seeing like, here's where my agency is, a whole nother problem arises, and that's where men start to feel threatened by me.
Uh-huh.
And that's been really interesting because I've been like, well, what's going on there, right? And
Uh-huh.
one of the things I've kind of come to is that men and women are defining safety differently,
Uh-huh.
and also that when women start to regain their power, it turns out there are actually a lot of things that scare men about us. There are
Uh-huh.
actually a lot of ways that men are hurting, that they are stripped of their power, and where they feel powerless to be who they want to be.
Yeah.
And so kind of fleshing those out is really, really complicated,
Uh-huh.
and really volatile often because it is so emotionally charged, right? We're all bringing our kind of our trauma
Uh-huh.
to the space where we've been hurt the most and then trying to have a
Yes.
conversation about it, which can be really hard.
Yes.
I've been grateful for men who kind of hung with me as, you know, we kind of like trigger each other and then try to have to like work this out in real time where we're
Yep.
like scared, right? We're scared. I'm scared of whatever I think they're doing. They're scared of whatever they think I'm doing. And we have to kind of hang with it smack dab in the middle. And that wouldn't
Yeah.
have been possible, you know, 3 or 4 years ago when I was still not able to live in my power. So it's really cool that I'm able to kind of be in that fray right now. But I'm always interested in finding ways where people can kind of come out the other side of that in repair
Uh-huh.
and healing. And it's been fascinating.
Totally. Let's see. So, so many different ways we can take this. You said something that was really interesting. So, one thing that's clear is that you mentioned being in the South a lot, and that's where you grew up, and that's where you live now.
No, I grew up in Ohio, but I
Okay.
spent a lot of time in the South. Had family who lived in Virginia,
Okay.
Kentucky.
I got it.
So yeah, I've kind of noticed like that little bit of the gallantry exists a little bit more obviously. At least when I was here, probably a decade ago, I remember being like, "This is really
Huh.
different than like Ohio boys." Like people
Interesting.
like opening doors for you and stuff. But I've
Uh-huh.
noticed a cultural shift where I don't hear a lot of men saying like I'm here to protect, right? There are still some
Yes.
edges of it, but it doesn't seem to be a phenomenon like it was 10, 20 years ago.
Right. Well, why do you think that is?
Oh, probably so many reasons. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well,
I don't know. I'm sure the
uh,
culture has shifted in a lot of ways.
uh-huh.
I know there's like a lot of like progressive and feminist pushes that maybe have kind of created a reactionary like, well, we don't need to do this anymore. Nobody needs our help. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think, Mike? I'm curious.
Think we have this moment in time where this redefining, and it hasn't really been clarified. It's still in flux, and there is just, I think we had some big, like big energy around, let's say, Me Too. Me Too was like a crescendo in recent memory
Yes.
of basically women saying there are men in the world who have power
Yes.
and haven't used their power in a respectful or protective way.
Yes.
And there are numerous examples of men in power betraying women's trust,
Yes. Well
right?
said.
And in response, there were many women who then, leveraging social media, said, "Hey, me too. I have also been mistreated by a man, and it hurt me. And frankly, I'm infuriated about it. And I've had no space to talk about it,
Yeah.
yada, yada, yada." And then someone else said, "I'm angry." And then thousands of people, then hundreds of thousands of women said, "I'm angry." And then I would say millions of women said, "We are infuriated." Right.
Yeah.
And I think then culturally, we had also responses where the culture then felt, I would say, organizationally, any accusation towards a man was immediately a existential threat to that organization, as being equated with the predatory bad man syndrome, right?
Yeah, which is a whole discussion.
Right. And so the knee-jerk reflexive response, which of course is so it's literally a microcosm of just inner world getting expanded to outer world. So when someone's enraged, it's always about volatility, and then we have to respond and react to we don't respond to rage, we react to it. And so if you have if you have your finger on the pulse of the culture, and the culture is saying rage, punish, rage, punish, the culture is going to respond with, we don't want to get punished. We organizationally, personally don't want to get punished. So we're going to be careful. And I would say relationally, when I'm seeing people in relationships who have one person who is enraged, the other person ends up being careful. They don't actually become better. They become more fearful and guarded and timid, which isn't actually the outcome the person who is enraged wants, but and the same culturally. But nonetheless, at least it had the illusion of there was something being done about the hurt that these many, many women experienced. You follow?
Yes.
All right. So I would say, and then we had this idea of like consent was already a thing, but consent became relatively much more popularized. And so we had these rigid rules. Always ask, always get consent, be a robot. May I touch you? Are you in bed naked? May I take your clothes off? May I kiss you? It became like nobody understood. We didn't really understand the relational quality, the subtle of like, who's the person in front of me. It became must always ask. And of course, this led many men to being afraid of showing up more openly with women, because many women who all human beings are hurt, but many women who felt hurt now felt much more open to antagonizing men who showed up maybe with care, but often maybe didn't do so in a thoughtful way. And so it wasn't, oh no, thank you. It was like, that's terrible, or you're doing, or there's a shaming. There was some kind of shaming. I'm sure almost every man now can tell you a story about how he was shamed in the last 20 years about behaving in a way that was protecting a woman who didn't show up for herself. And so he was told, including me, I've had numerous instances. I had an instance where I was doing partner acrobatics, which is dangerous in itself, and I need to focus a lot. And I was in a park. This was like 3-4 years ago with this woman that I know. And they kept hitting on her. And I saw what he was doing. He was just like, I felt like he was like, this is a young man who was trying to like, I think his intention was to like become more comfortable talking to new women. And this is, I think, has a good intention and can be useful for young men to learn how to become more open. It can be annoying for women, so it's complicated, right? To have to be in that situation of lack of awareness. And I could clearly see this guy wasn't getting the message. And he talked to the woman, and the woman I was working with seemed, ambivalent. She displayed like, he'd asked her a question and she would hesitate and look away. And then she returned to me to work. And then the minute that she was back on the ground, he would ask her again, like, hey, like, I want to hang out with you. We're talking to her. And I got the impression from what she was displaying was deep ambivalence and discomfort. And so at this point, I have my man training that says, protect women, right? And I'm literally also kind of conditioning I'm being conditioned in this moment. I'm literally protecting this woman from death while I'm holding her upside down. I'm very serious about protection right now and care. And so I'm seeing this guy not paying attention to her ambivalence, which seems very much like a no. And so I told him, I said, hey, dude, I think she's just not interested in talking to you right now. I think it's time for you to go. And she was so angry at me. And why? And I intentionally just made sure to give her the space to choose her path, to like tell him what she needed to tell him.
Yeah.
And she didn't. And so when I did that, I turned out, I talked to her afterwards, and she was angry at me for not asking her to not check in, because I was reading the room, but rather than asking her, I just made a decision. I said, please go away, because I didn't ask her permission to make him go away.
Yep. Interesting.
Yeah. And so I got that shook me. That really hurt me, because I'm pretty certain she was a no, but because I didn't ask her first,
Yep.
and her ambivalence, which was bothering me, and my ability to train with her was annoying me, I decided to act. I took away her agency most importantly. And because we're in this moment where it's like, and these gestures can seem threatening.
Right.
She was, instead of being, hey, I love that you did that, and I would just like to ask, for more. She was silent. She was aloof for the rest of the day. Yep. And I had to ask her, because I'm aware, man. I got the sense that she had really shifted. Yep. And I said, hey, I asked her, I said, you seem off now. And she's like, and then she said, because you didn't ask me permission to do that.
Yep.
And I am not alone. I am just very aware. And so I often speak for men that can't verbalize what happens to them. They don't know how. But I actually invite men into these kinds of conversations. Almost every man I've met can talk about several instances of being shamed into not acting in the way we were taught to behave.
Yep.
And so the end result now is you have exactly like this. Now, instead of being more chivalrous, or, hey, text me when you get home, let me make sure that you're okay, it's, have a nice night, good luck.
Yep.
I don't want you to think that I'm like too needy now, or like I'm caring about you too much, because then you might get the wrong impression that I'm like whatever.
Yes.
So there's I think there's a real fear now pervading our relationship, which is actually, ironically, in terms of what you were just saying, I think unsafe for everyone.
Yes.
Everyone.
Exactly.
Men and women.
The conversations I've been having with really close men in my life have been around that, because when someone starts to reclaim their agency, right? Me as a woman, I had what I would call obligatory powerlessness my whole life. So I was morally obligated by my religion to be in a place of deference and lack of authority. And I had to give all of my authority and agency to a man. So when I start to reclaim that, all of a sudden, right, I have power, and I'm practicing that capacity. And at the same time, you're probably familiar with the polyvagal ladder, right? I'm going from this freeze mode through the polyvagal ladder to fight, right? With the rage you were talking about. All these women are mad. We're like, it's necessary for us to be mad as we move back up to power. But that space is not conducive to repair and relationship, right? It's still for ourselves, and that's good. And the rage that we express is actually more for us than for others. But when we keep throwing it at people, when we've kind of gained that capacity, it ceases to become useful. And so, yes, I have noticed a lot of men, and I've actually had men say, you don't feel safe to me. And I've been like, what does that mean? Like, what about that is not safe? So we've had to start renegotiating safety from, not just what I felt like I needed from a man or was obligated to need from a man, right? But now it does become a dynamic where I have the capability of hurting someone because I'm now on the same plane, right? And so I have to learn a whole new set of skills to love and care about the men around me who, like you said, are often not aware of their own emotions. They're often not able to verbalize things because they've been conditioned, right? Like Bell Hooks talks about in The Will to Change, how they're just conditioned to have, they've had all of their emotions kind of flogged out of them from an early age, and they're obligated to just be these like kind of machines of violence and kind of these really, really unaware people, unaware of their own selves, and so therefore unable to do anything for anyone else as well. And it's really hard because the rage will come back up, right? Or even just old triggers of like, can I trust you? And even men who are learning to be aware, learning to verbalize their emotions on a healing path, they can get stuck in things that are triggering or that feel very viscerally like all of the things that kept me stuck as a young adult and as a mom, actually, the first couple of years of being a mom. So yeah, it's really, really difficult, and I'm glad to be in a place where I feel like I can kind of like navigate my triggers better, right? I'm really, really grateful for men like you and like many of my male friends who are really intentionally pursuing this, because it's not just like, here, do all the right things, right? Check all the boxes and like we'll be in our right places. There's so many cultural things to be kind of dismantled and then reassembled in a completely new way.
Totally. And I just wanted to go back to something you referenced, but it's really important, and it's really important, and I'm glad you did. It's also a complex and sophisticated topic. And so I would just invite you into sharing your perspective on it. And you mentioned the polyvagal ladder.
Yeah.
And so could you just, for someone that has no idea what the heck that is, what are you you said you're negotiating safety.
Yeah.
And with women, what is that?
Okay, I'm a layman at this, so you might probably know.
I'll help you. I can help. We can tag team this. So but I'll first your experience of that and your interpretation of that. Super.
So my layman's understanding of the polyvagal ladder is the way that we navigate the fight, flight, or freeze responses in our body. So our nervous system is wired to protect us, and so if we perceive danger, we'll either freeze if we are like really, really, really in a bad spot. Well, our whole body will shut down. We'll fight, right? We'll put up our fists and throw a punch, or we'll run. And so that people are finding that it's actually in that order. And I might have gotten the order wrong. Fight, let's see, freeze, fight, and flight. Is that right? Did I get that right? Freeze is at the bottom.
Right. Freeze.
Freeze is all the way down. Right before like death.
Right. And I would say that's shut down. Yeah, that would be shut down. That would be the dorsal activation. Yeah.
Yes. But either way, when you are coming out of freeze, so when your body, when your nervous system is coming out of the shutdown state, you actually have to go through the fight. So it means when you are in freeze state, one way to mobilize yourself is to actually let your anger come up. And so it's not a matter of skipping that step. It's a matter of actually feeling through it. And so, and you know, that's something a lot of men are often really familiar with their violent urges, and they only know of it as a negative thing, right? Because it's wreaked a lot of havoc. But understood in that way, it can actually be applied in healthy ways. And it's hard, right? Where women are at is we're coming out of freeze, right? We were immobilized. A lot of us were immobilized just by our gender. A lot of religious constructs obligated us to that. Cultural things, but we're in the middle of coming up through that ladder and saying like, no, this is not okay. So we're using our voices, we're getting mad. But again, that's still coming up out of that. It's not in the rest and repair. It's not in a relational space, right? It's still we are in danger and we're gonna get out of it. So people who try to engage with someone who they conventionally don't think is safe when they're in that stage, it's not conducive to relationship. It's conducive to safety. It's conducive to power, gaining your agency back. But you got to keep going up the ladder before you can actually like have a conversation that goes anywhere, right? Or someone to hold that space and say, your anger is honored. Your anger is okay, right? And that's a really important thing too.
Oh yes, your anger is honored. I know, because you just wanted to just go back to that. I just like slow down in that a little bit, because what you said is so important. And you mentioned like you said like being in those feelings, like making space for those feelings. Your anger is honored, which I would say right now, especially right now, it's gotten worse and worse over the years. There's this amazing book by Deborah Tannen, and it came out I think in the late 80s.
Okay.
And it's called Argument Culture. And it was this incredible like meditation on the decay and decline of civility, and how these, and one of the things that really encouraged that was cable, the cable news situation being so well, they just couldn't fill up the space with just news. And so one of the things they created was this show called Hardball, which is basically just two people yelling at each other, right?
Okay.
And there was some other stuff. There's some other really interesting pieces, but how politicians leveraged modern media to create these shouting campaigns, but just basically hardball, just going into hardball, and how the decay of civility was, and we also had like relatively few sources of information. And it was like, there was, which I guess Noam Chomsky has his very reasonable criticism of the manufacturing of consent, right? Which is like, we all generally had a few sources and we all kind of believe these few people in the entire country, and things got all kinds of shifted. And anyway, long story short, hardball comes along. People are yelling at each other. It is just encouraging shouting and just punishing the person who disagrees with you. And so Jon Stewart came along, right? The Daily Show, Jon Stewart. And this is a fascinating moment in which he came in on the show and he just eviscerated the host and his opponent, not with like, hey, let's argue about stuff, but just shamed them into the incredibly toxic culture they were cultivating, which was like shouting people down and not having a dialogue and not having no civility. And of course, that show actually was, well, the interesting thing is the show was taken off the air because it was clear it was he made it and like, it was a huge thing, and the show was like shamed. And of course, the network canceled it. And we thought, oh, wow, look, progress. That was like 20 years ago. And all you can say now is like, we are in the most caustic, aggressive, literally violent epoch in modern history, where families can't talk to each other, friends can't talk to each other about anything we disagree with, literally. And that is so meaningful to understand, like, hey, like, what are the kind of the cultural seeds of our discontent right now, and our lack of, like, why am I so infuriated all the time and so easily and so threatened, right? And I think that was just so interesting what you said about the polyvagal ladder, and just like, hey, look at this, look at the history of this. How we
It
can't
makes me
talk.
curious what culturally was kind of coming up and through, right? That rage had to have kind of a root. And I haven't paid that close of attention to all of the cultural narratives weaving together for that long, but I would guess that was coming out for a reason.
Well, I mean, it's complicated, and injustice, of course, and inequity is complicated, but also personal narrative, and all of this says all of the ways that we're relating to each other right now are not conducive to like de-escalation.
Yes, you're right.
All right. So how do we de-escalate conflict? Make you right. If I'm in a disagreement with you, MJ, I want to stop being in conflict with you, I have to make you right. And how rare is that in conflict today, that you're in a disagreement with someone and they go, you make sense. I see your point of view. And I heard it. I genuinely heard it. I didn't go, I heard you. What did I just say? I don't know. I don't know what the hell you just said, but you just said you heard me. I lied. I was just yesing you. No one would actually say that, but that's what they're doing.
Yes. A little different than active listening.
Right.
Well, I have a theory about that. I want to run this by you. So this is religiously oriented connected. Again, I grew up in a really religious home. Are you familiar with Calvinism at all as a theological doctrine?
Oh man,
Calvinism
it
has
was
like,
just high school. I
yeah,
used to know
okay,
that,
it's
and that
fine, it's
went
fine.
out the
So
window.
John Calvin had these like 5 tenets of his doctrine, and essentially it kind of peddles the idea that everyone is bad to the core, something called total depravity. So he said that humans are just evil to the core. There's no good in us, right?
Oh, right,
Well, it's a few Bible verses. And the idea of original sin is also kind of an evangelical concept, that like that our core being is sinful. It isn't beautiful, it isn't good, it's sinful. But what's interesting and little known is that Calvin's doctrine is actually the foundation of our justice system. I don't have enough brain power to go through the actual like timeline, but our carceral justice system, where people are either guilty or innocent, where bad things need to be punished, that comes from John Calvin. And so our entire justice system in the secular world was influenced by this horrific theological doctrine that really, really messes people up, because it's completely opposite of, you know, attachment theory. It just doesn't work, right? It just makes people need therapy is what it really does.
Yeah.
But when people are born with the idea, or are indoctrinated with the idea, or enculturated with the idea that they are inherently bad and wrong, that means they have to spend a lot of their energy defending when they do something harmful, right? Because anything harmful that someone accuses them of doing is a vote against them, that they are guilty to the core. So they can't spend energy repairing harm or listening. They have to spend their energy trying to block accusations, because they're already bad to the core, right? And so if they want to live in a way that doesn't kind of collapse under their own weight, they have to like go around being like, no, I'm not doing bad things, I'm not doing bad things, I'm not doing bad things. Because the psychological weight of being a bad person who does bad things completely obliterating, right?
Yeah.
And so I've noticed that a lot with Christian men. Okay, and again, this is something I'd be interested to hear from a cultural perspective outside of evangelicalism. But when I go to a man specifically, almost anyone, but mostly men, and say like, you did this thing that hurt me, that harmed me, almost 100% of the time they will say, no, I didn't, or here's why it's not true. They will even say, how dare you accuse me, right? The word accusation comes up. So it's never about like, I hear you, I'm listening, or even what you'd think was a normal human response of, oh no, somebody got hurt, what can I do to help, right? Because they perceive it as attacking them. And so I'd be interested to know if that cultural obligation, just like women, a lot of women in evangelical Christianity grew up with this obligatory moral powerlessness. I wonder how often men have this moral obligation for shame that actually completely blocks their ability to seek repair and harm, which actually ends up being what's unsafe, right? Because where I'm at anyways, is it's not about never doing a bad thing or never doing a harmful thing, right? We're humans, people are going to harm each other. We're always negotiating our relationships. So we're never going to, there's no like external law of like, here's what's good, here's what's bad. It's relational.
Yes.
But if we have this shame at the core, we can't go through the world, navigate the world repairing. We have to just block ourselves.
Yes.
So yeah, I don't know. Tell me what you think about that. It's like a working theory here.
You're spot on.
Okay.
So actually what I do therapeutically is I help people find this core.
Okay.
In these core narratives. I mean, I think culturally it's interesting to see one way in which people are influenced to believe at the core, I am bad.
Yes.
Pretty much every person I work with, which is most human beings, unfortunately, because of cultural narratives like this, at the core, somewhere they believe that at the core I am bad, and I need to do everything in my power for the rest of my life to prove that I am good.
That's it.
Yes.
That's it.
And so that is just I think especially for men, you're spot on. So not only, and again, great that you mentioned, I have to put this in the notes, the Men and the Search for Love or something? What is the book title again?
The bell hooks.
Yeah.
The Will to Change, Men,
The Will to Change.
Masculinity, and
Yeah.
something love, I think.
Yeah.
I always get
Yeah.
it. I always flip it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Will to Change. The Will to Change. So bell hooks. And I read that a long time ago, and it was like,
So good.
and I was literally the
it's
only
so
man
good.
I know that read that book.
It's so good.
Because bell hooks is, a pretty well-known feminist, and of course we live in a world of reductive simplicity, so you wouldn't even consider her writing as a useful concept for men. Regardless, shame at the core. But what she says, and she does so beautifully, is what I already knew and I've been telling people about, is the way in which these narratives savage men, these traditional narratives, destroy the humanity. We talk about what men do to women, which is, bad things, like Me Too, bad things were done to women.
Yes.
But I asked the question, not excusing bad behavior, but understanding why it happens so we can end the cycle of violence.
Yes.
Why are so many men behaving so poorly?
Yes.
And if we investigate that, what you'll find is that almost every single boy growing up is told, stop feeling your feelings.
Yes.
Sadness is emasculine, unacceptable. Too much happiness is effeminate. So, and most importantly, you need to be, and if you're in the business world, feelings are irrelevant. Our leaders of our society saying feelings are irrelevant. You need to be performing masculinity, calm. And so that is violence. Violence, as you mentioned, it's spending their time trying to block accusations. If you're already bad to the core, now you have to spend your life being like, I'm ready for a fight because I'm trying with all my heart and soul to prove that I'm a worthy man. And if you live in this patriarchal, if you're a man and you then grow up in this, you're taught, well, good news. You're not totally bad if you play the game, the man game, and jump into the man box. And so the man box is you make a lot of money, you are masterful. It got more complicated. Now the box got a little bit more restrictive and more painful. So it used to be just make money, protect women, have a house, have a good job, and that's about it. Now we also add in the 21st century, be emotionally intelligent.
With no tools or resources to start, right? With all this conditioning.
Right. Be incredibly emotionally intelligent, be able to read women and know yourself and be able to express your own emotions.
Yes.
This will make you lovable. And if you don't do this, because again, it's so binary. It's like good, bad, lovable, worthless. You're worthless. And the truth is, women over and over again, because women are part of the system, reinforce it. If a man is masterful, if he is a leader, if he has money and power, ideally he has some emotional intelligence, but it's not necessarily essential. He gets rewarded with attention from women. And if you're a man, all you can do is just watch, because no one's really taught us what it is to be a lovable human being. We're just all kind of like watching this pathological culture. So we go, oh, look, this guy was the leader of this party. He was the DJ or some stupid crap. He runs this party organization. He runs this organization. He's the dance teacher. He's the teacher of this or that. Women fawn over him. And they don't pay attention to me. Well, what did he have? He doesn't seem to be necessarily very attractive. Doesn't seem to be that necessarily intelligent, but he's leading. And sometimes when he's leading, he also happened to have money if he throws events. Oh, I need to lead. I need to be in charge. I need to have money. Nowhere in there is, oh, Well, number one, questioning the culture of who these women are, that they're seeking these kinds of men, these kinds of women seeking these kinds of men. It's so ubiquitous that we think this is the way it is.
Yes.
The pathology is normal. The sickness is normal. Then going, oh, what is me? What makes me lovable? How do I love myself? How do I relate to my feelings and grieve the abuse I endured, potentially either explicitly, if you actually did, because many boys were neglected and abused, or the abuse of just turning into a man, of being cut off from your feelings.
Bell Hooks says that really explicitly. I think she used a word like brutalized, self-brutalized, right? You have to kill everything in you just to be initiated into masculinity. And so you're already starting bereft.
Exactly. Grief. You're dead.
Yeah. Yep. It's devastating.
Yes.
And then, I think she addresses this sometimes as well. A lot of women in our culture, women are objectified, right? Like our bodies are objectified. What I've been seeing emerge with men is that what they do is where their value comes from instead of who they are, right? The idea that like every person is unique individual, that their you-ness, I think the word is haecity. Haecity means thisness, the thisness of every individual isn't even on our radar, right? Because we're so used to women being objectified for our bodies and men being objectified for their performances.
Yes.
And both are just as toxic, right? It's both.
Yes.
They're both objectifying. And so reintroducing to men, right? Like, you are valuable for who you are. I'll say that to a man's face, that he doesn't know what to do with that. He'll just be like,
yes, of course.
What are you talking about? What's that mean?
He doesn't believe it. He doesn't believe it. It's bullshit.
Yeah.
It's bullshit when you say that, because he doesn't comprehend that.
Yeah.
And also it could be insulting to him, because now you're lying. Well, now it's not like that. You're saying it, but he doesn't believe it. So now you're lying to him.
Yep.
What makes you so sure I'm lovable? I'm bad.
Yeah. Yes.
You're lying to me. You don't know me.
Yeah.
Right. And now you might actually get someone who's sort of guarded and aloof with you. Right. And that's like a fuckery of like, well, I thought I was inviting you into your humanity, and now you're responding to me. This is, of course, one of the many reasons in which we are so wounded relationally. And so you might extend a hand, and this man who was told he's bad his whole life is like, that doesn't compute.
Yeah.
And that would mean that my whole life is a fucked up lie. And I can't handle that. So you are threatening me right now in my world.
Yes.
He might not even do it explicitly. He might just suddenly start shutting down emotionally.
Yeah.
Energetically. He might close off to you. And then you're like, where'd you go?
Yes.
Yeah. You know what I'm talking about,
the
right?
Emotional ghosting. Oh, it's not fun.
Yeah. Yes.
But it's true. I mean, intimacy requires risk. And so that practice, that building capacity of a man, someone who's conscious and turns towards their own healing, their own awareness, there still is that point where they're kind of met with like, okay, wait, this is a little much. Like, this is really scary, right? Letting someone else see me for who I am is terrifying. So I'm going to back off. And it it can feel pretty rough on this end of it, as someone who kind of repeatedly faces that risk kind of as a personality trait.
Right.
But it is really sweet to see when men can meet you there and can kind of build that capacity with you, and say like, okay, I will meet you in this risk. I will meet risk with risk, and I will be brave because I think vulnerability is the most courageous thing that someone can do. And then we can go from there. That's how a relationship is built. That's how people become more whole and more themselves.
And I think what you said is just so important. Like, this is the edge, the leading edge of potential transformation of our society and our world, which I'm not super optimistic about, but I still fight for it anyway.
Yes.
But why I'd rather just die on the battlefield fighting for what I believe in, rather than to acquiesce to the tide. So that reminds me, risk with risk. How do we as human beings find our leading edge in life, in relationship? And for every single human being, that's different. And it's explicitly, of course,
Yeah.
influenced by so many factors. And for men, that can be, that's the culture. But for women, the same. What's your leading edge? So it might be, and this is where the hardest thing, and I think I was just talking about that with Anya this morning. How can I learn? This is where it is so rare. How can I discover and be curious about your world, MJ? It's not mine, but I want to step into your world.
Yeah.
I want to discover it. I want to walk around in it, even if it's uncomfortable for me, because some of your world might feel antagonistic to mine.
Yes, very much so. Well, we've got to break down the punishment, the punishment binary. So again, when our only options are guilty and not guilty, right, which is the justice system that our entire culture is built on, we can't afford to be wrong at all. So until we can say it's not going to be you're the good guy or the bad guy and the bad guy must be punished, we're not going to get anywhere.
Yes.
That's a massive problem that needs to shift. Again, it's entrenched in our very cultural, in our prisons, right? Like it's horrific. It makes it really, really hard for anyone to be able to engage on that level of risk in the real world. I think there's some good work being done with restorative justice systems. You know, there are people doing the work. It's a long way in coming, but interpersonally, it requires that we kind of decarceralize our ideas about people. So people have to have room to make mistakes. And we have to build the capacity of our own power. If we're used to powerlessness, we need to say, no, I'm going to step into my power with good intentions, with compassion, because when we are in our power, when we women are in our power, what other people do to hurt us doesn't hurt us as badly, right? When we let someone walk all over us, or when we've had no choice to let someone walk all over us, we have no room, right? Anything done against us is abusive, is traumatic. It will stick in our bodies. But when we can stand up to our full height and say, you know, I have agency to step back, I have agency to say no, then we build capacity, and we build our ability to say what you did to me isn't going to stick around forever, because I'm bigger than that now. And that's where I am at, where I know people don't have to hurt me. I don't have to let people hurt me. And so I'm able to take more risks with my heart, with my actions, because I have power. And I think for men, the more that they can divest from these shame narratives about punishment and about their own badness, I think they will have the capacity for more risk. That requires women meeting them there. And we're not all there, right? I'm really big proponent of, if someone's in a space of rage, doesn't matter who, holding space for rage is very, very healing. Right? So I'm not going to tell another woman who's like, I will never talk to a man again, they all suck. Like, I honor you. The hurt and the pain you experienced is that visceral to where you cannot. So stay there, be there. It's your process, it's your path. And if you can move out of that, if you can find enough safety, then I honor that too. Where I'm at is, I would like to be on the edge as much as I can. So I'm going to keep building. I'm going to keep strengthening and fortifying, surrounding myself with resources, so that I can be the one saying to men, right, I hear your rage, I honor your rage, because that's there too. And that's not something I think a lot of men feel like women can hold space for, and for good reasons, but it's just as necessary, because we're not in this to flip the power, right? We're here to heal. And that's very different than just taking over a power dynamic and running the show from the other end.
And I love that. And that is just such an amazing, you like just naturally brought this conversation for now to a close. And I just wanted to ask, just to wrap it up, to share like 2 or 3, you said surrounding yourself with resources.
Yeah.
2 or 3 resources that you have accessed that have profoundly expanded, I would say, your nervous system bandwidth for relational risk. Okay.
So an author who I really, really love, his name is Jared Yates Sexton. He's actually a political writer but he wrote an autobiography called The Man They Wanted Me to Be, published maybe 2018, 19. And he's a Midwestern man. He's a journalist. He actually studied like I want to say QAnon. He studied like the internet trends following a lot of the like active shooter situations 3-4 years ago, and kind of tracked the sad and devastated masculine that created these like violent spaces. And he does a really, really good job of embodying, of articulating the masculine pain without kind of like going too far on one side. So it would be a really good read for both men and women just looking to understand what men feel and what they go through, and also how to start to repair and heal. So yeah, I recommend that book to everyone. The second thing, well, this is something you're familiar with, Mike. So this active shooter, the El Paso shooter in, when was that, 2018 or 19? He has a doppelganger that I know from a Latin dance scene. He looks just like him, and that got me thinking so hard. So this guy went out and shot 22 people in a Walmart, right? Walmart. Wow. And he was sad, he was depressed, he was bullied, he couldn't get a girlfriend. So what did he do? He joined a bunch of online forums that were white supremacist hate groups, and collected guns, wrote a manifesto, and I read the manifesto, and it was amazingly cogent. And I'm thinking, okay, there's something else going on here, right? Because he's not crazy, right? He's indoctrinated and he's sad. So this other guy that I know at a Latin dance scene, he could have gone the same way. This is what I think. Like, who knows? He might have been sad. He might have been lonely. He might have been bullied. But what did he do? He went out and he started learning how to salsa dance, and he has so much dignity. When I dance with him, like he is beautiful. He is masterful. He embodies the masculine really well in a really tender way.
Interesting.
And I think so often if men had skills that they learned with their hands, if they had things that put them in the community, if they had connection to beauty through a craft, that might reconnect them to their own hearts and to their own value in ways that they don't feel like they have access to right now, right? So often they'll go play video games, right? Or go get obsessed with sports. Those like barely fill the holes that we're missing as a culture, whereas something like dance fills a lot more of them in a lot more embodied and a lot more holistic way. And I really think those kinds of skills are worth pursuing as an individual in a community to heal, right?
Yes.
For so many reasons. And lastly, the work of Dan Siegel.
Emotional intelligence.
Yes, yeah. I was introduced to him through Kurt Thompson. He's a Christian writer that kind of introduced me to shame research. But he studied under Dan Siegel, so he's my like secular recommendation. But either one, Kurt Thompson, Kurt with a C, wrote a book called Anatomy of the Soul. Talks about just reconnecting, talked about shame, connected a lot of dots for me, and Dan Siegel.
Amazing. And if somebody wanted to like follow your work, is there a place they could go to you write or whatever you're doing? How would people get in touch with you or follow you?
Yes, right now I'm just writing random stuff on Instagram.
Okie dokie.
My handle is Regressada. It's returner in Portuguese. REGRESSADA. Regressada. And yeah, I do actually like publish a lot of things there, and I will publish like whatever my most recent publication I'll put in my bio.
Awesome.
So yeah, come find me there.
Great. Wow. Thank you so much for your just sparkling and passionate exploration of the world, and your perspective is just so powerful and palpable. And it was a real pleasure, and I can't wait to do this again, MJ.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you so much too. I love what you're doing.
Good, thank you. So anyway, I have a client. So if I log off, I'll kick them out of the waiting room. So can you log off?
I will log off. Have a great
Okay.
day.
Okay. Bye, MJ.
Bye.